You ready for us, Shane? Ready. All right, I'll call the June meeting to order. Don't mind if I do. Let's start off as we do public comment. Ladies, I'll let you guys do like rock, paper, scissors to say who's going first.
Okay. Hi, I'm Connie Cantrell. I've lived here for 72 years. I wanted to share that I experienced something this week that you experience on a regular basis. You can't please everyone. And so I came in here, one of the things that we came in here was with a petition to take a look at the crosswalk that is in front of the Bradley House. And Kenna then gave us a really good idea that the petition, what's the petition going to do? Go to a website, and it's called the Traffic Calming Program. And so we did that. And so now we have police coming and ticketing the cars that have been on the west side of this crosswalk. Well, we have a new resident who had no idea that 50 people that he lives with had signed this petition to have this crosswalk looked at. Talk to me anymore. I needed to get out of his face because I called the police on him, and his RV is being ticketed. So that, because I've sat in your board meetings and yeah, you don't please anyone. I mean, you can't please everyone. So while I'm still going move forward on that, I think I have a letter to write to this young man about the fact that I didn't call the police. But yes, that's not safe.
Sure. Thank you for your empathy.
I'm Robin Bernstein, live at Littleton Crossing, and everything I say is from a pedestrian's perspective. But I've gotten another book called Crossings. It says that his book Crossings gives an eye-opening transformation formed by roads, highways, and the car, killing animals, human, from people who walk to people who drive. Traffic is a living laboratory of human interaction, pulsating with subtle display of a driver's license, but nothing about bad cognitive performance, cell phone distraction, or road rage flare-ups. To the driver, safety means getting speed. The cops can actually help here by giving speeding vehicles and cell phone users tickets with a fine and a mandatory class. Maybe they'll have an incentive to slow down. The cops can also be of service by being crossing guards at the Woodlawn Shopping Center, cops on bikes to get across the parking lot by the fitness center without getting killed. I know there is a dislike of physical exertion, but I'm asking you to not drive one day a week. So I miss the shopping cart and the freedom and joy I got from shopping at art. Thank you.
My name is Pam Chadbourne. So first, the meeting documents were posted. Thank you very much. I believe that public education at board and commission meetings and not many people show up. There's a reason for that. Part of the reason in boards is that they're not publishing all the data, that people's not being inclusive about that. So thank you for publishing this set. Public engagement, which you have on your agenda, is not your problem. It is to us, the public, that the staff owes outreach. That's a concept that was missed in the redo. It is a management failure. Real city planning does public engagement, information first, information in public with everybody, public or you, decision makers. So that's not being done. Our city hasn't done that for many years. It is a failure. Demand that information be supplied to you and the public, and then get information back. And then you can make a decision if you do not see the information going out first. That information and the public gets information. So I want to make sure that we know that transportation is part of the entire city plan. Transportation mobility plan. Land use code causes the effects on both. Land use code determines uses. And there are thousands of cities in the United States. There are a ton of PhD and master's students studying the relationship between code and transport. Did our new code have that? No. You folks have no data, and neither do we, the public, about the solutions that we need In fact, the new land use code didn't even have problems to solve and added bad solutions that don't fit our problems and don't solve them. We see that now, and this time around for the comprehensive plan update, we've got to advance the plan and land use code. It's got to be done. Please demand it. And the city is an integrated functional space. So it's going to work out that way whether.
All right. So as far as our agenda tonight, I think everyone's seen it. We're gonna start off a presentation on the forward-looking capital improvement plan. We've been waiting with bated breath since I think down, but I'm sure you guys have made it fantastic all that extra time.
All I've been focused on.
And then we'll spend time going through our two topics that since we had to cancel our extra study session from last week. Try to knock out those two topics and see what got left for other issues. Anyway, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jeff. I know you have a lot on your agenda tonight, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. Try to keep this to about 15 minutes and leave another 15 minutes for questions. So we're going to talk tonight about the draft capital improvement plan, which I've got a hard copy here. It's 400 and some pages. Mine is all full of flagged items where, you know, we're making changes already. This was adopted by the city council last fall as part of the budget process. So go ahead, next slide. So we'll go over briefly what the capital improvement plan is. And then we will not go through select projects unless there are questions per Shane's instructions, right? All right, sounds good. Next slide. Sorry, great. Next slide. All right, the capital improvement plan is from 2025 through 2027. It provides a strategic framework to administer and implement the capital improvement project across the city. And capital improvement projects are on all types of infrastructure. It's horizontal infrastructure like roads and bridges. It's also vertical infrastructure, all the buildings that we have, as well as including IT infrastructure. So think servers and fiber and stuff like that. That is infrastructure as well. This capital improvement plan identifies about 175 different projects with $300 million worth of funding source to fund projects. And then there's another $158 million worth of unfunded projects based on what we know today. So we're funding about 2/3, which is not nothing. But it's really important as you develop a capital improvement plan to identify unfunded, right? Never going to have enough money to fund all of our needs out there, but it's really important to identify what those unfunded needs are and to try to bring those to a state of being funded. Okay, next slide. So as we look at historically capital investment within the city, it wasn't much, not that long ago. In 2019, it was only about $10 million worth of funding that we had for all of the infrastructure across the city. That doesn't go very far. Post-pandemic, of course, prices inflated dramatically, we saw. Fortunately, thank you to the citizens for approving the 3A sales tax. That's bringing in a lot more revenue. So over the course of the next 5 years, it's bringing in a lot more revenue, looking at about $45 million worth of revenue that's coming in from the 3A sales tax fund, as well as from development and impact fees. Next slide. We look at development. The level of development that this community is going to see over the next probably 3 to 5 years is certainly significant compared to where it has been over the last probably decade or so. And all happening in a relatively short period of time. It's developing a lot of the last vacant pieces of property in the city, as well as a lot of redevelopment. We're looking at probably another 3,000 residential units and another 30,000 or 300,000, I should say, square feet of commercial and retail space. That's phenomenal. That additional retail is going to bring in additional sales tax revenue. The additional citizens living here are hopefully to spend locally and then bring in that sales tax revenue. So some of the projects on board, Mineral Place, the former Lumen site, Costco and other residential there, Evergreen and Toll Brothers developments at Santa Fe, Columbine Square at Bellevue and Federal, Aspen Grove, probably over the course of maybe 10 years is gonna see a significant overhaul of what they look like. And then Powers Place is a residential development at Powers in Delaware, right?
Yes.
Next slide. The financial impacts of the growth are, again, rather significant. They'll be bringing in building use tax over the course of this 3 to 5 years to the tune of about $10 million. A building use tax is going to go to those projects like ADA improvements in the right of way, traffic calming improvements. So this will be the neighborhood traffic calming program and safer streets, fleet replacement, things like that. Then impact fees. Impact fees are something that developments pay to offset the impact of their growth on city services. So it's things like police, library, museum, transportation, multimodal facilities, all those sorts of different impacts that they have. Some of the projects that those impact fees are going to pay for include Ketchikan Gallup Park design, Broadway and Littleton Boulevard intersection, the second phase of the Broadway fiber projects, the County Line Road shared use pass. You've heard about many of these projects. And we wouldn't be able to achieve most of these projects without this additional funding. So although development does have an impact on the community, it can be both positive and negative and can be viewed differently. But from a revenue standpoint, it is rather significant.
How is it decided that this project is funded by impact fees versus this project is funded by building tax?
Great question. Building use tax really goes into our capital improvement or capital project fund. It really can be used towards any sort of capital projects. Impact fees rather are by statute, they have to be spent on offsetting, mitigating that growth impact. So it's really think like capacity improvements. So additional traffic volume is causing additional congestion and delays at intersections. So it can be used to pay for mitigating that congestion. So like intersection improvements are a really good example. By optimizing that intersection, that's reducing the impact of that growth. Building new trails, for example, is it's growth. So it can't be used towards just general maintenance, like pavement management things. It's used for those
Things like ADA could there probably be pushed under impact fees.
I think that would be a stretch because we are required to achieve ADA by the Department of Justice. So it's not as a result of the growth that we're deficient in ADA. It's just a result of adequate funding.
But the improvements we build would have to be ADA compliant.
Of course. Yeah. And of course, the additional sales tax revenue that the commercial growth and the residential growth is going to bring in is still yet to be realized, but again, it's going to be great revenue to be used on capital projects.
Oh, I was gonna say like an impact fee for like the Quadrant Road, all those new residences would cause congestion, which we use the impact fees to help ramp.
Exactly.
I think when I built my house, there was impact fees of like 5,000 for the library, or like the Metro Fire District and all of those different things. So,
Exactly.
and it was not insignificant. It was
earmarked.
Yeah, it was like tens of thousands of dollars,
Yeah, and to your point, there's different types of impact fees. So like the park I can talk. The museum and library impact fee is one. There is a multimodal impact fee, right? There's more vehicular based on stuff. So
Yeah.
there's different types that go to the different types.
They only come from new construction.
New construction or redevelopment, anything that is growing, I guess.
Not remodels.
Not remodels, no.
ADU. There's an ADU, I assume. That's a good question.
That is a very good question. I don't know the answer to that for
I
sure.
think it would make sense, because there will be impact of sewer and, you know, all those things. Yeah.
Would the sewer fees or whatever we pay, that thing, that's going into capital.
That's going into the sewer fund, yeah, to pay.
Okay.
It's an enterprise fund, so it only can be used for the sewer itself. Can't be used for transportation improvement.
Vice versa, you can't use the transportation fund because it's an enterprise. One practice you guys are using is coincidentally having certain projects at the same time, so you don't have to pay for something twice.
That's the goal.
Yeah, a really good example of that, Derek, is Broadway and Mineral, the intersection improvement that we're gonna be undertaking there. The Costco, the Mineral Place development is having an impact to that intersection through that growth. They are paying us a fee in lieu for that impact, and we're gonna be putting that towards the intersection. So the developer would have been required to undertake those improvements, but coincidentally, because we're taking the improvement, it's gonna pool all those funds.
Do you have like a rough estimate of how much that is? Just like 500,000, 6 million?
The impact fees,
Yeah, for that intersection?
how much is the intersection gonna cost?
No, the fee that Costco is paying, or the
Costco paid.
Yeah, so,
curious how much it moves towards it, you know?
yeah, so, for the two intersections, for Broadway and County Line, I think there was $600,000 for that one was the latest number I heard, and this is a little old. And I think $1 million.
Yeah, a little over $1
A
million.
little over $1 million for Broadway and Mineral.
Okay, next slide. The capital improvement plan itself, if you decide to go through, divided up into a lot of different sections. And the reason for that is that everybody consumes information in a little bit a different way. You might want to be curious about where's the funding coming from. You might be curious, what type of project, what category, or what department is running the project. So we divided it up into a lot of different sections. So it's all the information just in a different format. Next slide. There are a variety of different funding sources to fund this capital improvement plan, the 3A fund, capital projects fund. We talked about a lot of that is coming from the building use tax. There's a conservation trust fund, which is some share back from lottery funds through the state. There's the impact fee funds that we talked about, open space fund. This is coming from Bravo County and Jefferson County open space revenue that they share with the municipalities. Then the sewer and storm fund, and then we have two internal services fund to pay for our fleet and then pay for all of our IT needs. Slide. Projects by funding source. So there are $300 million worth of projects in this plan. Where is money coming from? 28% is coming from 3A. 22% is coming out of the sewer fund, and that's a large number because remember, we jointly own the wastewater treatment plant with Englewood, so that wastewater treatment plant is a big number. That's a big expense, so that's why that's so large. Then capital projects fund, 12% from grants. I think that's amazing. That is a lot of revenue, $35 million worth of revenue that's coming from grants. There is no way we'd be able to fund all these projects with all.
How many of those are locked in versus expected?
I'd say probably about 80% of them are locked in.
As the taxpayer in Littleton, I'm very grateful for those grants. Yes. Yes.
Next slide. Then looking at 3A specifically, how is 3A divided up? It's divided up into facilities, transportation, bridges, pavement management, personnel. Remember, we can't build and design projects without people, right? So there's a 7% of the 3A funding is to pay for personnel. All of us here, most of us here are paid at least in some part by 3A because we are working on those projects. 100% if we're working on a different type of project that's not a funding source, Our salary is not coming out of there. All right, next slide. Then I know y'all were interested in, where's the impact fee revenue going? It's going towards the local match on the Bowles corridor study that we're gonna be starting up probably next year. So there's a grant on that, the 151,000 that you see there is our local match towards that project. It's going towards intersection improvements, again, thinking about that growth and that mitigating that growth. So intersection improvements at Bowles and Platte Canyon, Mineral and Platte Canyon, Broadway and Littleton, Broadway and Mineral, County Line Road widening, for example. So that's from Broadway to University. That project will be starting up here probably this fall. We're putting $2 million into that project, and Douglas County's putting money in, Centennial's putting money, and then there's $10 million worth of grant funds for that project. So those are the type of projects that transportation impact fees are paying for.
What's the debt service line item?
We are going to be issuing debt for paying for the balance of the Santa Fe and Mineral project. Probably about $5 million worth that will pay for there. And we're going to issue debt to pay for that and then pay back that debt with this debt service. And like Matt was saying, that project is growth related too. So what the debt service is for, specifically for that project. Yeah.
Part of the mentality of the city of that was the money is never going to be cheaper probably than it is now. So it was worthwhile just to fight inflation a bit and other things.
All right, next slide. Similarly, looking at impact fee projects. These are mostly new trails. As we look at the County Line Road Shared Use Path, for example, that's a new trail. The dollar amounts here are contribution towards design and then the local match on construction.
Is the county line shared use path? It's going to be a new path right alongside county line?
Yep.
I don't think I've seen any designs or that already.
We will have to share that with you.
Yeah. There's also C470 right there.
Right.
Sometimes it can be challenging to get to the C470 trail, so that should really help with that.
That's exactly the goal. Right on. What else? Mineral Station West that you've heard about, Mineral Station East. The second phase of the Slaughterhouse Gulch Trail right out here. We did the first phase last year, and then the next phase will be to take that Slaughterhouse Gulch Trail under the railroad track, connected community trail on the east side.
Is there any funding to install the two bridges at Runyon? That have been sitting there for 5 years?
That's one bridge, sorry, it's two parts. It's one bridge that's split.
Is it one bridge that's?
Yeah,
Okay, is there any funding to install that bridge?
That's a stormwater project, some erosion mitigation on the gulch there. So yeah, that is funded through the storm fund and contributions from Mile High Flood District.
Do you know when it'll be, is it part of this plan?
It is not part of, it is part of this plan out of the storm fund. I'll check with Sarah on the exact timeline. I think it's gonna be 2026 at this point.
Where will that bridge be?
It's supposed to connect Horizon or Heritage to Runyon. It's that.
Oh, that
where
little tiny
it
bridge.
goes right over the Leech Gulch, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, where all the bikes crash as they go down the hill.
yeah. Yeah, it'll be a nicer, bigger one, presumably.
Yeah, but the bridge has been there for at least 3 years.
When we get a big rain, logs go over it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Constructed the bridge over Slaughterhouse Gulch.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of hopeful that with all the things that they're doing at Runyon, maybe that could be like a nice icing on the cake to finally get that thing installed.
But that was a bridge we already had installed.
Took off the splice plates.
We like your style. Use, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, that project was delayed, obviously. There's been some emergency stormwater
Yes.
projects that have come about.
Last street.
So, things like that do have significant impacts on other projects. Yeah, unfortunately.
All right, next slide. Then, like I mentioned, there's a lot of unfunded projects. Just some of the examples: Project Downtown, Bellevue Service Center, Kettering Gallup Park, potential replacement of the library in the future. Safer streets. Right now, there is no sustained funding for implementation of safer streets, which we all know is incredibly important. So $158 million worth of unfunded needs. This includes just basic maintenance too. This is pavement management, facilities maintenance, like HVAC projects, things like that. A lot of unfunded needs out there. Money doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah, and as Brent mentioned, there's still some other needs out there that we haven't yet defined. Like we have the corridor studies in here, right? But that doesn't include the implementation of the corridor studies once those are completed, so. This number is larger than what is on the screen.
Indeed it is. Yeah.
And what prompts a project like these without the fundings versus the ones? I guess, like how does it make it into the plan versus?
How does it get funded versus?
Right, I mean, I guess it's like, is there a prioritization level? I know there's certainly, leveraging and capitalizing when a grant comes up and is relevant. Obviously leveraging new development if that's in an area, I guess.
And you're right on, Kelly. That's exactly been the focus for the last several years is leveraging outside dollars where we can. Some of these other projects where maybe not a lot of outside funding source is tending to fall towards the unfunded. Now, council has been starting to have conversations about debt financing for some of these projects. Project Downtown, the service center, for example. What that looks like is still yet to be determined. They haven't made any firm decisions. All right, next slide. Then we can look at projects by category if you're curious. How much are we spending on bridges? How much are we spending on pavement management? $50 million. So just another way that the CIP is divided up. Next slide. And same information, just in a graph form. So 21% of the $300 million what's funded is coming going towards sanitary sewer improvements. Again, remember that's the wastewater treatment plant. But for this group, a significant 19% going towards transportation and traffic improvements, and then another 18% towards pavement management. So a lot of this money is going towards these transportation needs. Next slide. And then the last piece of the CIP is individual detail sheet. So all 175 projects that are in this plan has a detail sheet that talks about the project. What is it? Who's the project manager? And identifies the revenue sources and the expenditures associated with it. So that is all I have. Any questions? Certainly can go into, if you have specific project questions, we can go into overall. That's the CIP.
I have an overall question, and this is gonna be something that I think you guys have probably already thought about, but it's gonna affect at least the next 4 years, because a lot of federal funding and federal grants has not been distributed or not being granted for future seasons. How is that affecting the capital improvement projects, and how are you guys prioritizing projects with that being an obstacle?
Great question. We've been fortunate so far that none of the money's been taken away. But that does make us incredibly nervous that, a lot of the work that we've done is there a guarantee we're gonna get grant?
Yeah, and most of our grant funding, while it is federal funding, we don't have direct federal funding. We have applied for some for like the corridor studies, right? We were unsuccessful with one. We're still waiting to hear back about our build grant that we submitted. But otherwise, it's federal funding, but it's distributed either from the state or from Dr. Cog at the regional level. And so there hasn't been as many changes with that funding yet. Knock on wood. We have had some challenges with the state budget though, from state funding and the issues that they're having at that state level from Tabor and a bunch of other issues. And so there are some challenges we're working through there, but we've been, like I said, we haven't really done a lot of direct federal funding, so we haven't been hit there yet, but we are rethinking our strategy, especially like with the corridor studies, thinking that we were going to use federal funding to do those projects, and maybe we need to look at other options. based off of grant funding.
How does grant funding pay? Do they give it to you when you start the project, or do you have to finish the project, they approve it, and then they give you money like 2 years later?
Typically reimbursement based.
So that'd be scary.
Yeah, so you take on a lot of risk then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not always 2 years, right? So like with our TIP grants, right, we submit reimbursements every month and then once they're paid. So I mean, there is a delay, but yeah, that would be a big risk if there's like a 2-year delay, right?
And we
But it is always reimbursement.
typically, yes.
Yeah.
So you do have to have that money to front to pay.
How often do you have to load a project to cost more in order to get that grant money? Like if you would have done it without the grant money, would it have been cheaper than doing it at all? Or how, does that ever weigh in? So anytime you get federal dollars or you have to go through the NEPA process, there's a whole lot of environmental review and like going through historic and like, part of your world. And so I'm thinking like the race crossings we did downtown, we had originally thought those would cost, what, $400,000 or $500,000, and they ended up costing, what, roughly twice that?
I think it was around 700,000.
Okay, so.
I just closed that project today, actually.
Yeah.
I got my final acceptance on it, but.
Yeah, and that was one that spanned the pandemic, right? So there's some increase in there just because of inflation and stuff like that. But yeah, there's always an added cost if you go the federal route because of all the extra review and everything, so.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a material extra cost. It's like.
Right,
some profit margin.
Officer, right?
Yeah, it's the hours that your consultant's spending.
Yep.
Filling out documents, attending review meetings.
There are more requirements about like Buy America and
Right.
those regulations that can potentially increase costs as well, but we don't necessarily have like a threshold, but there is kind of go or no-go conversation, depending on the size of the project. Is it worth having federal funding? Or is it worth just to self-fund it? And so,
Yeah. And
anything like over $1 million, you could say it's worth getting that federal funding. Don't quote me on that. If it's a smaller project, that's only a couple $100,000, it's not always worth going after that federal money. So that's something that we on the staff side have to weigh.
The math is easy, right? If it costs twice as much, they're not giving you at least 50%, like.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and it usually does take much longer. Windermere Bridge over the Highland Canal is an excellent example. We actually hit a point with historic preservation where they pretty much just shut the project down. They're like, we won't let you build this structure. And at the time we had designed, we'd gone through structural selection, we prepared exhibits on this expectation that, yes, this looks good, we're pleased with what we're seeing. And then they were like, nope, we can't do it. And we pretty much went back to an old design and we're like, yep, we can just float this design right through. So the design implications are much more extensive, probably I'd say like double your design time. CDOT's also gotten a little bit slower to respond, likely with some of the cuts and some other priorities. And then construction, as you guys mentioned, we actually have to hire a consultant to manage that. So there are times when potentially, if we have staff available, we can manage some of these projects. So you're paying for those consulting services to do your materials, your EEO and EBE documentation, as well as the contractor has to provide that and the BABA and Buy America documentation.
We heard from one of the consultants we worked with about a month ago from Penny at FHU. She was just at the national conference, the ASCE conference in Washington, DC. And they just had a meeting with Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, who said, hey, we are getting transportation funds out, but with less staff and with kind of the change in priorities from the administration, it's taking longer. So we're hopeful there still will be transportation dollars, but right now that's hearsay, right? It's like, so someone said that someone said that someone said, so.
Yeah, but to Matthew's point too, like planning level grants, there's less regulations that go into it, right? So that's one of the reasons that we decided to apply for federal funding for those corridor studies, because it's just at a planning level. So there's less of those like implications of design review and CDOT oversight and other requirements. So it's also like, what phase is this project in? Is it worth going after federal money or?
I have two quick ones. How about I ask what you do yours, and then if there's still time, I'll ask my second one. So my first one actually relates to, and how this all relates to something that Pam had mentioned before. Yeah. This type of information is really good. I don't know that most citizens of Littleton even have the first clue as to how much stuff costs, how much revenue we have, how much we spend. What are we as a city and as a department doing to get this information out there? I'll pick on my favorite topic, which is pavement management, right? You know, Matt and I talk about pavement management and he's tired of me now.
I'm gonna set one up in the morning when I'm like fresh and energized, not like at 5.
I'm always looking for I don't get up early, I get at night.
I'm gonna knock on your door at like 7.
But you know, I mean, just so you guys know, like we looked at, walking through with him, and I won't take you through all the math now, but happy to do it at some point later. If we were to have the appropriate timing and level of pavement management to keep our streets looking good so people aren't complaining about them, we're looking at something in the neighborhood of $20 million a year budget just for pavement management alone. And this year we're gonna spend.
That's like 8 million cups. Yeah.
This is the most we will have ever spent at 8 million.
Yeah,
Like that is like
the biggest.
like a record.
Yeah.
It's been, I know going back to like the late teens, it was under $1 million. It was about $1 million.
Yeah, the whole fund was 10 million then, so.
Yeah, so
12 million.
my point is more taking this information and getting it out to the public, because I think people need to see this. We need to get this message out there that stuff costs money.
Yeah.
You know, nice things are expensive, and we need to figure out ways to pay for them.
Oh, you think go.
I'm gonna F you.
I was gonna say, like, and when we build new developments, that adds to the liability side, you know, of the.
Yes, new housing developments
Yeah.
cost us money.
Yes.
Not to pick on anyone, but we were at Trailmark at the meet greet meet, and Trailmark has no commercial. It's all residential, so it's like, that costs us.
Yeah.
You know, and we get very little revenue back for it.
The people who live on Littleton Boulevard subsidize Trailmark. Yeah.
But Costco's, I know, and there's all sorts of trade-offs to Costco, but to Costco development. We all can acknowledge that, and it is going to mean a lot of revenue that allows us to pay for these things.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out ways to get that out so people understand that there are trade-offs. And it's not like you can just say, no Costco, and everything else will be great. There's a flip side to it.
Well, and there's some argument, the rooftops drive revenue too. You know, the more people in theory, you know, if they're spending local, bringing in that revenue, I don't know what that, you know, that ratio is, but trade-offs at least.
Yeah, there's no solutions, only trade-offs, right? But to answer your question, you know, with communication, I think the city's become much more aggressive right now. We implemented our first cone zone page, and so we're in the middle of the most aggressive years since, like, I don't know, ever.
Yeah, I mean, the transformative nature of implementing this plan, probably not since the railroad depression have we seen this volume of capital improvement in terms of dollars and
So
impact.
other than this, where I've seen this now,
Yeah.
what have I missed? What has been out there that I should have seen this before?
Yeah, so what we're implementing is that cone zone page. I'll run through the projects. Then we're hoping to implement a citywide dashboard.
What is a cone zone?
Yeah, cone zone just talks about where there's construction projects.
Oh, yeah,
in the
yeah.
city, traffic impacts, detours. But it has all these different projects listed out. So you'll kind of get a view of what is active and then what's queued up. And a lot of those will link to the project page as well.
And are we putting dollar amounts on those too in the
We
code?
don't have dollar amounts yet, but I don't know if that'll come with smart sheets.
So, yeah, so there is an effort going on through the city manager's office, we're calling it a citywide dashboard. And so we're using Smart Sheets, which is a project management tool, to start tracking all of the projects across the city. That we're hoping to have rolled out by the end of this year, and maybe early next year, but that should have more transparent information about projects, budgets, timelines. Because right now it is, you know, based off of project web pages and what information is available, which, you know, each different PM creates those. And so it's not standardized across the board. So this should be a more standardized process. I believe budgets are a part of that, but I think to your point, Jeff, like I think as a city have been trying to become more transparent with our projects and telling the public what we're doing. I feel like the budget aspect is something that we could still work on though.
And I will say, and I mean, just as a thought, and I know that Alex doesn't like me at this point, but like, this is where the, that unfunded projects, like, that's, to me, that's a key part of it, is helping the city understand, the residents understand, like, there's some great things we need to do, but we don't have money to do it. Helping them understand what those are, and maybe like, each issue, you're dedicating like a little write-up to, here's what the deal with the museum is, here's the deal with the library is, here's what the deal with whatever those other things were. So that people understand, and oh, by the way, that's gonna cost $30 million, we don't have it.
We have had some talks too about telling the story of 3A a little more in depth. You know, we have our Big Things Littleton page, which is kind of everything 3A. But again, I think telling that funding story of what exactly is 3A funding, and this is how your tax dollars are going to work. Especially if council decides to issue debt in the future or seek, you know, additional sales tax or bonds or whatever they decide to go with. We need to tell that story of, this is the money that we have been spending, and here is the unfunded needs and why we're asking for more money. So it is something we're thinking about.
Each council member holds public meetings, right, in their areas. I mean, we
Varying degrees, yes.
you know, we can, I mean, presumably they are also able to articulate, you know, some of this. They obviously voted on the budget, they've put it in, they're behind the plan. So perhaps we can advise them or feed them some information that we would want them to be sure to touch on in those meetings. I mean, I know they're usually very much public comment and answer, which is fine. But I think we might have an avenue too, to use them to carry the message.
And the future citywide dashboard too will also have a mapping component to it as well. So I think we're all hoping that it can be kind of a one-stop place that you can go to this dashboard and see all of the projects, you know, not just from transportation and not just public works, but across the city, and see all of the work that's happening. That's the end goal, right? We'll see what the iterations are and it's out, but knowing that we do want to be transparent with the work we're doing and show it visually in a way that people can understand.
Yeah, and I think something like, you know, the funding sources hasn't been as like requested as just people want to see what's going on in my neighborhood. Like, you know, if you're as interested in funding, usually that is the group who's looking at the certified annual financial report, or they're looking into that. But for, you know, the majority of the population so far is just like, how do I get to where I'm going? Where's the closure? What will this project do? You know, and I think that as we've ramped up production of projects, you know, our staff has also been trying to keep up, but it's just grown so fast that we're like, oh my gosh, like we're trying to implement these new web pages as we're in the middle of construction and procurement season. And, you know, it's kind of like, all right, well, what do people want to see? What are these things? So that feedback is really
You're
important.
100% right. That is what most people are going to see. Where I'm going is more from a policy perspective.
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's very few people in this city who feel like they pay too little taxes. Everyone feels like they're paying way too many,
Yes.
right? But then it's at some points you guys just point out to them, like, I know it feels like you're paying a lot, but there's still a lot of things we need that our tax revenue doesn't cover.
Well, there's also a perception that every project that someone is, you know, they're driving down the street and they see some level of construction happening, they don't necessarily know about the grant funding and that we're leveraging something that's already taking place. And that's why this got prioritized, right? They'll look at that and say, God, why are you doing that project when, you know, this crosswalk is crumbling over here? There's just the assumption it's all coming directly. Yeah. And that's a harder conversation. Like that's a, you know, how do you put that in, you know, 3 bullet points? But I do think that's an important part of it. It's like the dance, the balance that has to be played. And I think that doesn't necessarily, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something I have seen that, which you're kind of sort of doing it, but also have you ever heard of the concept of like a project board? That's kind of like a cheerleader that they put near each of the sites in addition to what you guys put in. That kind of identifies major bullet points, but it's something that is very visible, it looks, something that people can identify, this is a city project, this is a city project that's like grant funded, a city project that's, like community funded, or, things that help them identify, because they're gonna see costs go, and some people are trying to tie that to the city. Some people are seeing the improvements at Mineral Santa Fe and the same thing, and they don't know just what they don't know, not through anything, just, it's a flood of information out there, and anything that can be very visible, very simple, can be a great way of bringing that to them.
I saw that today, actually. I was up by Longmont and Boulder for work, and I saw like at a park, there was a new crosswalk and a flasher, and it said, this was funded by, and it said right there what it was funded by. And I think that's pretty effective, just say like,
Yeah.
your vote actually, this is the impact of your vote, this nice pleasant crosswalk.
I concur, because I know in my living arrangement, 90% of the people have no idea we have a webpage, let alone use it.
Yes.
So we haven't put out like a project board to that extent. We have been putting out some QR codes on projects which will directly link to the project site. It does dive into some of that information of grant funding, 3A. We have signs, actually, we put on a couple of projects that are funded through 3A. And it'll say like your 3A dollars at work. The Mineral Mobility East Phase 1 project will have signage on it for
Repo County Open Space.
Yep. Things like that. But this is all great feedback, because as we expand, we do want to make sure that we're communicating effectively and we're providing what people are looking for. It's a wide breadth.
So my next question is gonna sound very counter to my first one. First one I was saying, we don't have enough tax revenue, we got a lot of expenses. And I don't know if you guys are the right people to answer this, and if you're not, point me to the right person, we can move on. I'm curious, when I look at all these numbers, how do we as a city make sure that we are not price takers, that we're more price setters than we are price takers? And what I mean by that is, I know we put things out to bid, but like there's a difference between putting out to bid and seeing who gives you the lowest price versus actually actively working with vendors and with partners and saying like, we know what it costs you to do this. We have all these other projects in the queue. You gave us a price of this, but we know you can do it for easily another 20% less and still make profit. And that's what in the private sector, that's what bigger companies do, right? When you're spending $50 million a year on stuff, you're pushing your vendors saying, I know you can get it lower. I know you bid this, but what are we doing to make sure we're doing that versus just calling up and saying, like, what do you charge for, a crosswalk? And then, okay, sure, put one in.
I mean, I can answer that to some extent. Yeah, so if we were to negotiate in an invitation for bid or a request for proposals, which does include waiting on the cost, and we were to try and negotiate, that would violate our policy, our procurement policy. And I don't know if it violates a larger policy or not.
I mean, federal procurement policy and laws.
Yeah, so that's when you bid it. So after you get your bid in, we have turned down projects before if we're like, this is too expensive, we don't feel like this is what it costs. Main Alamo Bridge fence repairs was one example of that. The first bid we received was way higher than we thought was reasonable, and we turned down the bids. Federal Bowls, when we reconstructed that intersection, we actually turned down bids on that twice. And the way that we got it to an acceptable level was we shut down the intersection going north on Federal. And that actually lowered our pricing by like, I don't know, I forget, like $1 or $500,000. Yeah, it like halved the price of the project and the time. Once you have projects under contract, say you get a change order for something, there is cost data presented by CDOT, and they go quarterly, and we will compare against the quarterly cost data. And we'll use similarly scoped projects. So, say we're installing 400 linear feet of 30-inch pipe. we're gonna look at CDOT and see to make sure it's like 200 to 500, I think, compared to the one who's installing like 10,000 linear feet, because that one is the same magnitude. So we do have flexibility to request that, and if we really doubt it, we can do a time and materials analysis on that. But yeah, that's construction.
But I think less ability to negotiate the way you're outlining, Jeff. And the public sector unfortunately has a little more constraint than that.
That would be so.
I think a good example is though, like on the county line project, our design consultant, they gave us our 90% opinion of probable cost. And it was a little higher than we expected, but we just had a project where somebody bid on Mineral Station East. And we're like, hey, some of these unit costs are actually lower, the prices are actually going down as things kind of calm down. So we can use those multiple projects, like you said, to, you know, if somebody does come in high, we can say like, well, we know that price is too high because we just had a company bid on a similar project for a lower amount. So competition, even though we still have to go through the formal channels, is the way that we get the best price, hopefully.
There are times of the year too, like if I was to put out a project right now that I was like, I need this done by the end of August, I'm gonna pay for it.
Right.
It's kind of like when you know, say you're like, I need my house redone by this party I'm having, the contractor's gonna be like, great, you're gonna pay this amount for it.
So this is gonna be one for Matt and Brett specifically, asset management with the streets and the maintenance program and the identification of innovative materials and methods. So one thing that I know from my experience is like you get a lot of older streets, newer streets, but there's a majority of some streets that are not in a maintainable 30-year life cycle. In addition, one thing that I've engaged with is like some of these newer materials like geogrid, geofiber, allows you to use a maintainable section, but maybe it's not as much asphalt and everything else, which does sometimes provide some tremendous savings.
Yeah.
How are you guys incorporating those types of items into the maintenance and construction budget?
Yeah, we actually won an award for County Line Road based on, and it's innovation, technology and sustainability related, because we use methods like hot in place recycling. Hot in place uses half the amount of new materials.
Yep.
So, you know, a lot of your carbon emissions or like EPDs, you know, are from just mining that raw material from the ground. Whereas a hot in place can use half that amount because it's putting it back.
Yep.
Half of that's going away, which will be recycled as recycled asphalt pavement.
Yep.
And then you're mixing that existing material stain with rejuvenators in place.
Yep.
We chose a more durable surface on County Line Road. We used stone matrix asphalt, or stone mastic. And we used that with the hot in place recycling technique. So SMA has a higher carbon cost, but we offset it by using the hot in place. So you're essentially coming out, you know, roughly the same if you were to do just a hot mix asphalt, but you're getting a more durable surface. We also do consult with a lot of the you know, companies who are using fiber in their mix or fiber in concrete to see if you're really getting that much better product. It's debatable. I'm actually on MEGPEC, the Pavement Engineering Council for the Denver region, and we do discuss a lot of things like this.
Those are pretty riveting meetings.
We remember the year in 2024.
Yes, congrats, congrats.
All these accolades, where is this major award?
Yeah. In the closet.
We give these awards out.
I think it should be here at every.
Being in like the Littleton report though. I remember,
Yeah.
you said, I remember.
They're over in engineering, we haven't taken out.
Big display case.
With one award.
There's some grant awards on us too.
Yeah, we need to.
Yeah, we do hang them.
So,
Yeah.
so we do need to move on. If anyone else has any other questions, I'm sure these guys will be happy to.
I just had a quick one. Is the CI, it's a 5-year plan, but is it updated annually? Because it seems like by 29, it'd be pretty worthless.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And then real quick, I had an answer to Josh's question about the bridge. Sarah says that she got FEMA approval documents yesterday, so they're looking at October, November start, and it's 9 to 12 months, so.
9 to 12.
That's a big project. Well, cool, thank you. Yeah.
He's working it, so.
Yeah, I know.
Sarah is never not working.
Right.
We'll talk some asphalt.
Yeah, I'm good to.
Don't get him started.
Just not at 5:30 now.
All right, so let's move on. The next item, we're gonna move into trying to finish, not finish, but get our next two TMP update topic presented and completed. So the first one we have is the communication, community engagement, which was Michael and I. I've already talked enough. Maybe I'll let you talk.
Sure, yeah, I can kick us off.
We've had a chance to already review these, and so we can do kind of the quick version of it and then open up for questions.
Definitely. Yeah, so we kind of structured this like we talked about in the previous meeting where we first looked at the existing plan and then made recommendations for the update. And what we discovered is with regards to the current TMP, there's basically nothing in it regarding public engagement. It's kind of sprinkled around here and there, but there's not a dedicated section. And it doesn't really have any clear guidance or structure for, outreach types, frequency, formats, any of that. So we have a lot of room for improvement in the 2025 or 6 version. We also learned that to support the TMP and Envision Littleton, there was kind of a companion document that was written to guide the public engagement process to contribute towards that plan. So that's fantastic. And it has some good content, emphasis on inclusive and different types of outreach, but it didn't really have any kind of education component. It was really just geared on getting information out. So that's an area as we get into the next section that we think is definitely an area for improvement. So I guess now we can move on to recommendations.
If you don't mind, let me jump in.
Yeah, please.
One thing that we talked about when we did this is, unlike the other topics, this is one where there's sort of 2 pieces to it. There's communications, community engagement in the actual TMP itself, but also communications and community engagement in the update process. So we felt like we needed to address both.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you see there is like, there's the 2019 plan, but Michael was just talking about that there was this plan, there was a plan to update the plan, to communicate about updating the plan. Like there was a process for getting community engagement of like, hey, we're writing a TMP, let's get involved. We want to hear what you have to say. And then the second section is what's actually in the TMP as far as communication around all transportation related issues. So we feel like we need to address both of those. Sorry, Michael.
Nope, great. Interrupt me whenever you have something to add. So getting into recommendations here. And some of this we've talked about, when we were preparing for the outreach, we talked about different outlets that we wanted to use. So, and I guess the other thing to say, I said this before when we first presented funding. I think in practice, Littleton's doing a lot of these things that we're going to recommend. This is just an opportunity to formalize it in the TMP. So first one is expanding outreach beyond traditional forums. And we talked about, again, definitely schools, utilizing the PTO for outreach, youth organizations and other civic groups, and then, local grassroots networks like Rooted in Littleton and Vibrant Littleton. Continuing with digital tools. I think some of the recent projects have used story maps. I really enjoy that. It's a great way to walk through the project, see it, geospatially on the ground with aerials and all the different features mapped. I think it's really cool. And that's a great asset to use. We'd like to see more of that. Definitely ensuring inclusive engagement. And that goes back to the forums and different types of outreach to make sure we're reaching all different community members throughout Littleton. Developing multi-phase engagement plans, so ensuring that we're gathering input and sharing input throughout the project, not just at discrete milestones or decision points, but making sure we're sharing and transparent throughout project planning and during construction. Maintain transparency. And I didn't say this before, but actually there's quite a bit of references to transparency in the current plan. When I was looking through it this evening to kind of refresh, I was kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised. So we definitely want to continue that. If you can scroll up just a little bit. And then what's that last one? Incorporate educational elements. Okay, so going back to what I said before, it's not just sharing data, but really helping the public understand why transportation improvements are needed, why we're spending money like we are, sharing benefits and helping them learn how it will, benefit them in the long run.
Trying to get people to think long-term. The team definitely the long-term strategic plan. I know. You can lead a horse to water. At least take it.
Jeff, do you want to take this? You want me to keep rolling?
Either way, I mean, you're doing great. So this is just the section now on actually what we would like to see in the TMP.
Yeah, so this is content in the TMP to guide future project delivery for, with regards to public outreach, and some of it's repetitive or in line with what I already talked about. So providing clear criteria on when engagement is required. And some of the factors that might drive that are, the project budget. Maybe we establish thresholds. If it's $10,000, you don't do any engagement, or whatever that number is, to kind of always have a standard for when engagement is in play. Projects that have high levels of disruption to traffic and engineering and access to people's neighborhoods and driveways certainly would rise to the level of requiring pretty robust engagement. And then construction duration could be another one, short time frame, quick build projects, maybe not. If it's going to be multi-year, absolutely.
And our thinking here is, at least mine, I think we were on the same page. This is like, we heard these guys say that the TMP is something they pull off the shelf every time they have something to make sure they're hitting all the right pieces. So part of the thinking here is that there should be in there, all right, well, we're doing this type of project, have a little bit more clear, like, okay, well, that means you need to have emails out there, notifications of these methods, get something out here, signs, whatever it is, so you don't have to try to think and be too creative. I mean, not that you guys aren't creative, but not having to be creative, right? Like more of a roadmap of this type of project means we gotta do these types of things.
Well, that it's standardized, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the discussion we've had internally, is that a lot of times it's up to the individual project manager and what level of engagement it goes to.
Okay.
And the next one kind of goes to the same thing, right? So it's giving actually within the guidance of like, if you're doing this, these are how often you should be communicating, the types of communication you should be doing. What are some best practices for that, whether it be online or in person. So just really trying to make sure it's more documented. This is standardized is kind of already said.
How did you guys come up with your communication strategy around the Alani project? Because it seems like there's been a lot more on that survey, I guess.
Yeah, so like kind of set us up to the project manager. So when we put out the RFP, we knew that this is a very politically sensitive project. So we said, hey, you need to have a lot of emphasis on public engagement. And that was actually one of the deciding factors with the team that we picked, is because that was a large portion of their project budget. And they seemed to get like the kind of the heaviness of the project. And so yeah, that's where it's just kind of up to us, but where, like Kenneth said, if there was a standard that we can meet, right? Then if we don't meet it, we can be held accountable, right? But then if the public comes back later, like we've had pushback on the Mineral East project to say, hey, I didn't hear about this, then we can say, well, we went back and we met the standard that's been agreed to in this plan. And maybe that needs to change in the next 5-year update, but for now, we're meeting what everybody agreed to 5 years ago.
Would that help you with RFPs as well, to have that communication strategy for a contractor to know,
Yeah.
that's their
Yeah.
I think so,
Yeah, the more detail we can provide and the more apples to apples comparison we get, the looser the scope is when we put out an RFP, then it's up to interpretation, and that's where you get into trouble with like some change orders, like, well, we didn't really know, right? And hopefully their scope and fee that they submit is detailed enough that we can anticipate that. But yeah, anything that's written down is helpful.
Yeah, because then you're leaving it up to the consultant to determine what's appropriate for each project.
Yeah.
Well, and on a lot, as Shane mentioned on a lottie too, our thinking, writing that RFP and that scope is we're talking about a residential street with single family homes and all these driveways, and we're talking about changing that. And there's going to be some very big conversations about trade-offs, especially around parking and other things. If we're gonna, improve safety and mobility, something has to give. And so projects like Elati and a lot of these other future corridor studies that we hope to do on these residential roadways, we feel like the engagement needs to be very high, right? Because, your on-street parking space in front of your house could be impacted. So we have to engage those residents, and they have to be along in the process, and they have to have buy-in. Otherwise, it's never going to be successful, or however you want to define that, right? Whereas, some other projects, there are less impacts. So what is the need for public engagement at what level, right? If it's, especially like off-street trail type stuff.
And again, that's just our view of this was having that in writing so that you don't have to make that decision each time. But instead it's more of a clear roadmap and getting the consultants' input and thoughts on and guidance on best practices as far as that goes.
Well, and I think we mentioned this before too. It's interesting. I feel like when social media first came out, everyone was like, oh, this is the future of how we communicate with the public. And what we've really realized is like people want a physical mailer sent to their mailbox.
Yeah. And then
That is what they are looking for.
And then they won't look at that often.
No.
Correct.
And then they'll just hear about it when it gets really angry.
Right.
On social media.
Anger
Cones go up in front of their house.
Yes, anger and fear is what politically motivates people, not good communication.
Right. If we send a postcard to your mailbox and you choose not to read it, we can say, hey, we sent it to your address. Whereas, on social media, not everyone's on social media. Everyone's checking it.
I mean, maybe that's how we should do our next postcard campaign, is say, hey, we're demoing houses on this block next week. And then
JKLO.
Yes, it's your.
High rises across all of Littleton. Now that we have your attention.
Yes, exactly.
We're gonna change our sewer system. That would be so good. I would really respect that.
Please do that.
I have a feeling calls is not going. But as we heard in public, we can't make everyone happy. And so we just have to try our best to communicate out as much as possible and through different avenues. But some people are going to either choose not to pay attention or not to engage, or, they are going to hear through the grapevine, and that's just part of the job as well. So.
But I do think for this specifically, I do think having it in the TMP is a really good idea. Say like, this is what the citizens would like and expect, of communication.
Establish a baseline.
Yeah.
Does it make your job easier?
And I have to say, like, on-site signage is so powerful. I know the city has stepped that up a lot this last year. And it does make a difference. Like, people are like, oh, this is a change that I could either expect, or this is why it happened. So better than Facebook or social media.
Right. You're actually connecting it to the project.
Exactly. Yeah, it really does. I think that people drive by it every day. This is, the people that live here will see that sign 20 times, so, yeah, that has an impact.
Well, and something I've heard some feedback on is like the Costco project. One of the things people talked about is that big pull down of the building, how they have it online and people can look at it. Maybe there's additional ways to incorporate something like that into other projects, like, say the underpass going from Broadway. People may not think that's cool, but a boring machine going through, like, little kids will eat that stuff alive.
The boring machine might eat the kids alive.
They actually, my son's daycare is nearby, and they actually walked them over to watch it.
Oh, that's cool.
I know. So excited.
Little TikTok.
The I don't know, Michael, if there's anything, I think we can kind of skip through most of a lot of these are sort of the same theme.
Yeah, I did want to touch on feedback loops. That was a late addition after Jeff and I met and brainstormed. We went back and, did our separate thing and, we thought that was something that was really important. Just to, give residents some feeling that they're being heard and that, you're implementing the wishes of the people, if you will, so.
We're actually using the feedback.
Yeah, so we thought that was important.
And it gets like clearly highlighting, like, we made this change based upon what we heard in this meeting or in this survey or whatever it was. Or these people yelling at us.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other important thing I'll throw out beyond that was just the last one, which is where we both thought the TMP was falling a little flat, and we've talked about this topic before, is the educational aspect, right? Like a lot of what we saw was in there, or in the first one, is about peer communication, feedback, but there's an educational aspect that could help all of us. You guys, us, citizens, of if we can figure out how to educate about what these projects are, why we're taking them, how they fit into the grand scheme.
Could be something along the lines of what we were talking about earlier about the strategies, making that to where it's even more out front of people and they can really consume it and understand it.
They can understand the system as opposed to just the.
Totally. Well, yeah, as the CIP conversation is, how is the money being used, right? It all goes back to people understanding how our city's funded through sales tax, right? A lot of people don't even know that. The implications with development and those types of things, and
And how much we rely on federal grants, and so that we're like, our current system of funding insufficiently funds the city. We're dependent on those, in order to make things work.
Well, I'm curious if there could be a section on, like, you said the $20 million just to maintain roads, but we're only gonna spend 8. Is there a way to communicate, like, how much is that $12 million gonna cost us? Cause it's 12 today, I'm sure it's like 24 when you actually get around to it, so. And not just in inflation costs, but in deferred maintenance costs. Yeah, so.
Instead of resurfacing.
Right.
it's a reconstruction, and that
Yeah.
what's that price increase with you go from resurfacing to reconstruction?
Tenfold.
So that's 120 million? To 12?
12 deferred is 120 million someday. You're gonna have to pay. It's like,
It was eightfold.
okay.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, the math's way easier to 10. All right, so with that, so on the communication, you guys have given feedback, I haven't heard anything new though. Are you guys comfortable with this?
I think we ship it.
Is it ready to ship?
Yeah, I think it's
I think you
great.
guys did a great job.
Yeah.
Good job bolding the parts that mattered.
I think that made it really readable. I think that's
Yeah.
Ship it, where's it going?
That's a great question.
I know. Going into our recommendation.
I didn't mean.
We'll loop back to that towards the end of this
Okay.
conversation.
All right.
There's some questions we all have.
Ship it where?
All right, the next one was that you? Big
So
connectivity? Who's that? You and
That was me, Derek and I.
Okay.
So go for it, Derek.
All right, so one of the things, and these are some items that have existed in this community, other communities, and we have definitely expanded on some of them. We want to see with the connectivity, there is kind of like the planning of like what the system is. You got all the maps and everything, but we want to see those more integrated into each other, because right now we currently have them all separated in a sense. And then there could even be additional classifications, like say you got a road, a bike, and a ped like priority route. That's gonna need a different emphasis than something might be a car route or a ped route or something like that. We wanna see that very visible, very there, and then we wanna use it to identify the capital improvement projects that are gonna be to achieve what that safe and effective design will be. There's also gonna be gaps in the system. As we know, we got a lot of islands. And those islands are done well. Like you look at downtown, it's done effectively. It's gonna be done amazingly in the future. But if you go outside of downtown, there's a lot of areas that are not up to that level. And these need to be priorities because there's many members in the community that can operate in the islands, but they want to go to other islands or they want to go to other parts. Or maybe they just want to get to the island. And we want to make that possible for all citizens within Littleton. Another thing, and we will probably be discussing this significantly in the July 9th, is gonna be the type and use designations. There is currently everything is laid out to a very technical level for engineering and planning doctrine, but we want to see that expanded. Because there's certain streets, like you got Ridge, you have Prince, they're, in my opinion, and others are being used for one purpose, but also are serving a second purpose, which they may not have been intended to be used for. A lot of people take Prince because they don't want to drive on Santa Fe. People take Ridge because they want to go downtown, but they don't want to go through Littleton Boulevard. And this may not have been how that was actually intended, and we need to have these streets identified for that, but then the follow-up sections and engineering standards make it to where the unintended uses are there and we can redirect them into something.
How do you have those conversations around, what do we change the street to get it back to use? Or do we reevaluate the actual use? And so that needs to be kind of part of that process in the TMP.
Another thing is there might need to be new uses identified that, like we've talked about a little bit about maybe modal streets. We talked about some innovative ideas about second thoroughways or, you know, bike focused highways. And these things are not exactly as well defined, not exactly tangibly defined, that there's experimental areas in different communities, but we should be leading that effort because that is very critical to quite a few of the citizens. Just like Santa Fe will probably always be a car route. There's gotta obviously be routes to get people from Broadway to Santa Fe, and not everybody is gonna take the highway out of choice, so we have to be able to account for that. The same thing for communities like Highlands Ranch coming through us to get to downtown Denver, or Centennial because they wanna get to the highway and stuff.
Can we charge them an impact fee?
Put toll booths all the way around the city.
I digress.
But that's something like when Costco builds up, Littleton residents are gonna shop there. So is Highlands, so is Charmer, so is Centennial, so is probably gonna be Denver proper, and quite a few people. And it's gonna be one of the largest facilities in Denver.
And the restaurants that have applied to be in there are gonna draw a ton of traffic too. Like a ton of traffic.
So that's a very critical thing. And there's as you can see, we have expanded pretty heavily into various parts and pieces to that. And it could even be things like looking at the trail system, looking at sidewalks, looking at, you know, different parts and pieces and having designations to what they should be. Is like one thing I see in a lot of cities for sidewalks, for instance, you got multi-use paths, you have 10-foot sidewalks, 5-foot sidewalks, 6-foot sidewalks, but we want a complete system that is putting those in, but also accounting for current and future uses. Because like one thing that's come up are like the little motor scooters or those little boards. And there's been accidents that people have either unfortunately passed away or have been significantly injured. And the system is not taking that into account, no fault of the system, but that is a new use that has to be accounted.
We're seeing like how impactful it is years down the road, because like our sidewalks were probably put in the 1960s in our neighborhood, 1970s, and they're so narrow. And that is costing, you know, like that could be costing us money now, whereas if they were good, they could still be in use, you know?
Except. Scroll down. Shane?
I'm sorry, can you, on that last section? Scroll back up real quick. I had a question, when I didn't quite understand where you're going with this, the last two visuals there.
Yep.
I don't know that I understand the difference between those two.
So basically, one of the goals is gonna be, and they may be related, but one is a like allowance of design and the other is a constriction for design. And we do want those to be two separate subjects. Because you may want to put raised crosswalks to restrict traffic. But you may want to, widen the street to allow traffic. But if those, like, one is gonna negatively affect the other, but if they're in two different subjects, they can almost be identified as like parts and pieces that can be put together to create a complete street section, street system or thoroughway. At least that was the intent they had with it. And they could be combined, they could not be.
You seem similar.
I'm sure they're different, I just don't understand, like. My brain's not processing.
And I will say this is coming from the mind of an engineer, so there may be some average Joe language that.
Tread carefully.
Derek actually did work on these ones pretty specifically for quite a while. So, it was an engineering standpoint.
So the idea, so if we take those two and pull them together. Can you speak like a human being for a minute?
It shall also be planned, sounds very.
It would be something like identifying a system of tools and parts and pieces that can be assembled to meet the intent of the street. Or a thoroughway or a walkway, so that we meet the use that we identify, but also expanding more on what we have a limited system currently, we want to expand that to other options. So that we can better piece together something more effective.
Yeah, I think what I took away from it is like, if people are using prints, the TMP should have allowance for, well, we should spend more money on Santa Fe to get people off of prints for unintended use. And we could spend money on prints to constrict, slow down, and try to discourage that use. And so there's like, it's a multifaceted approach where we need to look at what is the other road that's the problem that's causing this to be a problem. Does that make sense? So
Think
like,
about it as a system.
thinking of it as a system, exactly. Like Derek had a good example with how Mineral used to be for miles and miles and miles right there at Santa Fe, going west. But as soon as they got the C-470 interchange figured out, which is, a mile south of there, also that whole intersection got a lot better. It's not great, but it got a lot better. And it was because of this whole, unintended consequences of all these other things. But so I think what he's saying is in the first one, look for designated routes that can help alleviate the improper use of traffic on a road like Prince, and also look for alternative ways to redesign Prince to make people know.
And like, right, that sort of all falls into that system-wide view, like,
Yeah.
we're not focused on Prince by itself, we're looking at it as part of a greater system.
Correct. I learned some engineering things.
But Josh is really good at putting it regular people.
He represents.
Somebody's gotta talk to the people.
Very regular.
Just can't have the engineers.
Just
Exactly in the middle.
Customers.
perfectly average.
So, what's our next page? We need a translator for this section too.
And this does get a little more into that system of, not only looking at Littleton, but looking at all our surrounding and partner communities and neighbors and how they're gonna affect us and kind of have that addressed in the TMP. One, to identify our own burden, but to also identify opportunities for community items, because maybe like us and Centennial could identify a solution that could make both of our lives easier. And just to put that there so that the citizens, that everybody can understand that intent. We hit the second bullet pretty heavily just a few minutes ago. The street design is just kind of very clearly defining, which the current TMP does well, but the new uses and the new interpretations would definitely need to also be expanded on. Number 4 is like a public transport. We are lacking in public transit, unfortunately. And we have significant members of the community that need to be served by public transit. But we need to memorialize it. We need to identify, critical needs, critical areas where that public transit should be focused at first. And maybe even come up with some ideas or priorities, like, do we rely on RTD? Do we rely on the city? Is there some type of regional solution? How do we expand on that so that we can identify a path so we can get to something that serves the public in a reasonable amount of time?
One point about this, like the transit gaps are like tourism, commercial centers, access to regional transit options. It'd be really, we have people that I've seen coming to these meetings that use like buses and things as their primary mode of transportation. It could be really great to have some citizens come in, and say, come in and speak with us on where the main gaps are, and actually hear from them directly. Instead of it being bureaucrats, not you all, but the next level up. The next level up.
Just regular.
On a regional. Yeah. Instead of, like, it'd be intriguing to hear that, because like, I think of, like, I would, if the bus came every 2 or 3 minutes on Broadway to go down to Mineral, I would walk up the hill, and take my grocery bags and just hop on the bus. But it's like every 20, 30 minutes, and sometimes it doesn't come at all, and so like, it's not only like, tourism stuff, but like, how do I get to where I am going, and like just the day-to-day things. Like my daughter went to Colorado's finest school right by Sprouts on Bellevue and Broadway. And she was like, I'm not taking the bus, it's scary, and it comes and it never comes, and so we had to drive her up there, for 2 years and then drive back down. We live right on a bus line, so yeah.
Like an example, like when we were at the Trail Mark meet and greet, one thing that they had identified that used to be out there as an RTD service was like a public transit stop that went from Trail Mark to the RTD station. And that's not as well served, if not barely served anymore. That has had a noticeable impact on the citizens of that Trail Mark area.
Yeah.
And when we moved into our house, I could get on a bus and go straight to the light rail station on Ridge Road.
Yeah.
And that's gone now. Like now I have to walk 1.4 miles to get to the light rail station. And it's just gotten worse. When I was 12, I got a bus pass for my 12th birthday, which sounds insane. Because I have 12-year-olds. But, RTD back then, I lived in North Denver. I could literally go anywhere in this city with no inconvenience. It was, transfers were simple, getting to the next bus was simple. And ever since they put in the light rail, they've just killed the entire, all the wheels, all the wheeled buses are gone. And so.
And then they killed the RTD lines.
And then they killed the light rail. And so we have like nothing now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think with our presentation with Dan, I think the way, especially the smaller companies like us are gonna have to move forward is providing some sort of road transit or our own service, because we just can't rely on RTD to provide that, right? Because even the routes that use, like the one on Mineral, the one on Ridge, are part of a larger route. And so even if citizens in Littleton are using it, if the overall route is down, it's not, giving them some revenue to try to make up for what the money they're spending, they're gonna cut it, so.
So when it comes to the transit plan, again, this is about what we're gonna ask the consultant to try to add into the TMP. What are you picturing that they would do?
So
What would that look like?
Our current TMP has bike priority, pedestrian priority routes, and there should be a transit priority streets as well. Like these streets they have transit, they connect to our commerce, our assets, our,
So a map of, even if we can't implement it right away, a map of like, here's where transit makes it.
I think the prime example of that would be like, one of the key areas would be like around the school of the deaf. And it's like, public transit would greatly serve them, and that's something that should be identified and publicized in the TMP.
And we have transit priority routes in the TMP. They're also based on RTD routes, 50% of which don't exist anymore in Littleton. So looking at those, and maybe we don't need to be dependent on RTD routes, right? Maybe it's like, hey, we think this is an important transit route, so how do we fund something
That's what I'm hearing. I like that. It's like, this is what we need, not what we have.
This is like, this is something that Pam has brought up many times, but like, we could have a circulator bus. And it could, I mean, we could have a circulator bus in Littleton, and I think it would be incredibly used if it went like, you know, like maybe like Windermere, Ridge, you know, Lottie, Broadway, Littleton Boulevard, like.
I thought a lot about this. There should be two circulators, one that goes Ridge, Prince, Littleton, Broadway, and then there should be another that goes Ridge, Mineral. Broadway, Mineral, back up to Prince. And like you could cover almost 80% of our citizens if you had those two buses, always just running the same direction, just always making right-hand turns.
And we're yes, and we're making like, we're doing such huge projects to like get kids to school. But if like, parents might be ecstatic if like, you don't have to drive your kid to their exact school. We have these buses that they can just hop on the normal bus, you know, like we did 50 years ago. You know?
Like the Mr. Rogers trolley.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something we've heard a lot from residents and you all is, you know, the shopping cart that no longer exists and how much people really use that service. I will say on the transit front, we're still hoping to do an Arapahoe County-wide transit and micromobility study, and I just emailed the project manager again in April. He said they were super close to an agreement with CDOT. We should have a kickoff soon, and 3 months later,
It's feeling a lot like us waiting for RTD to get a new.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was really hoping that study would have been complete by the time we start the TMP so that we could have the results of that to feed into this, but unfortunately, I'm feeling the TMP will start before that project. And then Dr. Cog also did get some grant funding to look more at the financing piece of future BRT routes, and Broadway is included in that. So we'll also.
That'd be amazing.
So, you know, Broadway BRT is a long-term goal, right? But we're slowly making steps to figure out how can that become a reality.
Yeah, I think one thing that could be amazing too about a Littleton bus service is that RTD is at such a scale now where things fall by the wayside. But like, if we had our own bus service, it could be wildly safe, I feel like, you know, where like our local cops just come and get the problematic person off of the bus, you know, and say, nope, you know, not, but like at an RTD scale, it's challenging to do that, you know?
Well, and I think like the microtransit, like Lone Tree presented on, you know, those systems are wildly very safe where people are sending their kids on them and, you know, and it's, you know, point to point destination. And so you're not having to make transfers and those types of things. And Dan talked about how Douglas County is going to replicate that service in Highlands Ranch. So I think there can be a lot of lessons learned once they start that service next year of how well it's working. And if there's, you know, could we replicate that in Littleton?
How are they funding it?
I think internally.
Well,
Golden has one that is in partnership with University Lines.
I would hope ours would be just continually running bus services and not on demand.
yeah.
But on the flip side, we identified out earlier is like if Highlands Ranch is doing something like this, if we do something along with it and pull the services together, we.
Created a regional transportation district.
Interesting.
I'm gonna keep saying that whenever that topic. Sorry.
Well, and that, you know, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but the Arapahoe County-wide transit study, you know, we were really excited about that. It is to look at it from not just at a local level, but at a countywide level. You know, are there solutions with Inglewood and Sheridan that, you know, we could team up with them to do something?
I think so.
Or Centennial, and especially how do we get people to like DTC without having to drive and those types of things.
AT bus service that goes from Arapahoe Station to DIA, like there's no way to get there, like in a very fast, reliable way. That would be amazing if we were like, yeah, we're gonna just funnel everyone east to that station. And we're just gonna continually have buses, because they come every hour. So if your flight lands like 5 minutes after, you're waiting an hour to get back on it, you know, and there seems like that's such low hanging fruit for us to do something great there.
Now, I do think we're gonna have some challenge. The fifth point here is like connectivity and safety. And one of the things that we have identified is that there are safety concerns in quite a few parts of the city. These can be school zones, which we have talked about extensively, and I know has come up quite a few times, but you got the pedestrian corridors like downtown, people coming into the block party. They came from outside downtown, they came from north, south, everything else, but they had to get through there through different routes, and some of those streets and some of those crossings are there, but they can maybe be upgraded significantly too, to be absolutely safe. Or you could look at like Littleton Boulevard, but you got people crossing the street to go to breweries, you got people crossing the street to go to coffee shops. And some of those businesses are very popular.
And would possibly be even more popular if we gave great infrastructure for people
They
to
can actually get
actually.
across the street,
Yeah.
risking their life.
Well, this goes back to, we have too many islands, and so people feel like they have to get into the island and park there in order to utilize that island. Instead of just home and connecting, or, you know, the next street over. Yeah, so it's these islands that are really kind of an issue, and many of our assets are islands. Like Bemis Library to me is like one of the craziest, hardest places to get to by bike or walk on a Saturday. There's no safe street that connects to there, unless you live there.
I have a video of my youngest, like, right at, is it Kaylee and Gallup there?
Yeah.
Going up that hill, and it was Littleton Museum Day or whatever it was, and so there was cars all parked along all things, so we had to ride our bikes in the middle of the road, you know, and I have a video of her being like 6, trying to navigate that, and me being like, don't go too far to the left, you know, and it was, yeah, that's an island.
And it's an island that I let my kids go to. Like, it's such a great asset in this city, and I don't feel safe letting them do that anymore. Like, you have to do it yourself. And so, yeah, but areas of commerce, and I think we need to start thinking of areas of commerce of not just Littleton downtown, because there's no grocery store in Littleton downtown.
Fresh market.
Well, that's Woodlawn. I don't know if that's still
That's true,
considered downtown, but yeah, these islands, because yeah, once I get to King Soopers, it's fine walking through their parking lot, but I really have no way to get there. And that's the concern. So now they need a bigger parking lot. Now we need all this other stuff, and so.
I live 3 blocks from King Soopers, and crossing that intersection
Oh, yeah.
with groceries would not be a pleasant.
Yeah.
I see.
People do it though too.
Yeah, going like east, turning left to go north on Mineral there. I always see people in the crosswalk, and there's double lanes of people trying to get across, and I'm like, oh, this is scary. Yeah.
Yeah, we live near like, whatever that Manna Bakery
Yeah.
development is. And the only way I'll go there is because I have trail access.
Yeah,
Like if
same.
I had to walk on
Yeah.
Ridge, there's no way I would actually go to that area of commerce in our city. And so, too many islands.
Well, and to kind of highlight that, because we don't have these routes, Mineral's a great example. I'm sure Dave has seen lots of very active bikers using it as a thoroughway. And then there's a lot of traffic and a lot of citizens that also see that as something undesirable. But if you take that away, where do they go?
Yeah.
C-470?
Yeah.
Santa Fe? Like, those don't excite me, like Mineral's at least digestible.
Yeah, at the end of the Lee Gulch, right at the hospital there, where they're gonna put the bridge, right at the end of the Lee Gulch Trail, in essence, like if you go up or south on Broadway, up to the shopping center, I ride my bike there sometimes to go grocery shopping. You're either on an incredibly wide road that is also the turning lane, and people try to jump in that turning lane early, or you're on the sidewalk, which people on bikes, I don't think should be on sidewalks, you know, from a pedestrian perspective. And so that's creating another island, you know, like where people can't actually get to the grocery stores.
So you can do what we do, and we use this, there's this giant straight up trail behind the Safeway. It goes right straight up a hill from Southbridge, but yeah, those are the.
And that's an island too, because you can't really, it's not a dedicated trail.
Exactly. You almost have to get off your bike to get up it.
Yeah, we're riffing on this a bit.
Sorry. Thanks, good one.
So it's like Festivus, we're airing grievances.
We'll have the off-road trail recommendations after the meeting. I think you guys did a great job on this. Anybody have any other comments or feedback on this?
That's great. I would bold some things similar to the other one. I think that actually does really improve readability.
And I would put in across the board. I'll pick on the very last bullet as an example, but there's several other places. You say use recent incident data to inform changes. I think we all kind of know that that's a thing. I think what we're looking for the consultant to do is provide guidance on how that should look. Right? So it's more about, provide guidance on how to use recent data for changes.
I also think too that my thought is that as a board, we've chatted a couple times on, we've identified like a priority as getting kids to school, getting people who are aged out of maybe driving cars where they need to go, the school for the deaf, like the most vulnerable in the city, prioritizing them first. Even if it doesn't say, even if the road data doesn't say, yeah, we have a lot of 6-year-olds riding on this street, like that's what I'm saying is that like data may not say it.
Proactively,
Yes,
as opposed to only reactively.
Yeah, proactively saying, we want to get vulnerable people.
It's probably
They need
both.
to go
It's
first.
probably a combination of the two,
Yeah.
proactive and using instant data.
Yeah.
One of the things that we should also have is, in essence, if everybody can imagine like a tripwire effect, like, okay, we're 10 years in the future, we now have hoverboards and the Prince and Ridge intersection is now the most dangerous intersection of this new technology came out. But now we weren't able to plan for that, but how does that get reacted to and get incorporated into the plan? Because if we're waiting for every update, that could be a 5-year process, but sometimes technology and personality trends and everything else move at a different speed than some of the internal processes. But these need to be quickly identified, memorialized, and addressed in a way that can be effective, because just like we're talking about like those little boards with the big black tire or the motor scooters that are going 50 miles an hour. Right now we have very little regulations, very little enforcement, and some of those are kind of free to do what they want, but free to take whatever consequences they get. And they're working on things that were not designed for those uses.
I'm trying to future-proof it as much as possible.
I think give us the flexibility.
Flexibility.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on the connectivity part? All right, the other two things that are in the packet, we're not gonna talk about now. But when we covered culture change and funding, we didn't have this format down. And so those two groups went back and created the one pager, although mine's 3, but
But I'm the chair, so I can.
what was that?
But I'm the chair, so I can.
So if you guys could look at those and get any comments to Shane and Kenna on those, as far as any edits or questions or concerns. If there's anything big, we can bring it up in the meeting on the 9th, because we have one more of these. We're going to talk about street classifications. But you can funnel all comments, whether they're on this or the culture change or the funding, Shane and Kenna, and then we'll pull the other for the July 9th meeting. Yeah, should have checked with you first for that.
Yeah, and let's see. So we'll send a packet probably, well, next week, probably the 3rd. We'll be off on the 5th, so. Yeah, you guys anything next week, that'd be good.
So the one other thing I want to talk about here, before we get off of this topic, is I want to check in because I don't help the whole board understand and help me get up to speed. There's been a little bit of talk about the TMP update potentially being postponed.
Yeah, which is about that's about as much news as we have. Yeah, so.
We are actively working.
For clarity.
Was it funding or what? Can you share what the?
Yeah, so I think the worry is just kind of staff load and how many projects we have. And so I think, we're trying to advocate for, we see this as the most important plan. Because if we have this overall plan, then that will help inform these smaller, corridor studies and things like that. So.
Yeah, so we also, right, like the Safer Streets initiative is hugely this is hugely impactful for that. And then secondly, we have 3,000 units going in. And the city of Littleton's pattern is to ask the developer to express if they think it's gonna be a big problem, like traffic, do the study. And so I do think the TMP would be really good in conjunction with these 3,000 units going in, these new changes and the Safer Streets initiative. it seems like that would be tone deaf if they deprioritize that, yeah.
Here's what'll happen if the current standards are kept in place, is they will build it, we might have what sidewalks, we may have street sections and street uses that are not gonna serve the residents. Now, we're gonna have to go fix that with additional city budget and additional city funds, and also deal with citizens that did not think this is what would be going on, because we're operating on an old standard. And that's gonna have a significant future cost that should be able to help justify at least some of the financial and other constraints, because it will make your future work further easier as well, which I know you guys are probably making that argument. But-
Is there like can we be a voice in support of prioritizing?
And not right now, it's really, I think, just kind of internal conversations and and so just us kind of.
Pick it, or
Was that?
we need to pick it, or what?
Pick it, yeah.
We need a good protest.
Yeah. I mean, even like, even if there is new development, right? Obviously, we do want to get things in plans, right? If we have new ideas and things like that. There's still the 2019, so if another Costco wanted, not saying there is, but if another Costco came in, right? It wouldn't just be like, well, old standards, 2.5 foot sidewalks, things like that. They would have to kind of go with whatever the current TMP is. Plus, community development is really good about talking with developers too. So we can, ask them, like, a lot of developers are good about like, what are the plans? And they'll talk, they'll work with us to dedicate right away with those things. So, but it always is, if we have a developer who's not, if we have it down in a plan, especially one that's been publicly vetted, then it's a lot easier to say, sorry, this is the requirement, it's here on paper.
And I can just say, like, in my daily job, I deal with it. There are developers that if you're not publishing something and you have a standard that is not your goal, they legally force you to accept that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it or not.
Exactly, yeah.
And on that note, I sent an email out earlier today with some links. One of them is there's public comment open for our Littleton engineering and design standards. It's a really great read of over 300 pages, but I indicated the page number where the typical sections are, and that's really what I think you would all be interested in. And those typical sections did come out of the original TMP, and we have reviewed them since and vetted them. So you can take a look, and then there's a public comment form on the website. Anyone from the public, please feel free to go to the website and look at that too. So, things are still happening in tandem, right? The TMP informs land use code and engineering design standards, vice versa. So, we, like Shane mentioned, we're handling this internally, but I think the whole idea of this TMP work that you all are engaging on with these 2-pagers is, being able to package those and give them to council, or even present them to council. That's something that we should probably talk about. If you guys are interested to go and present them to council, I think that would be a great opportunity for you all. We'll let you know though if anything else.
When do we present to council? Was it July? No.
We don't have an official presentation to council. We have our memo that we submit.
Oh, okay, I thought we had something set up to go.
We are going to, I mean,
Advocate.
I would like to try to put.
Yeah, and then we can say, and on our final note, the TMP.
And on this topic, I also think that, we'll see how this goes, but probably gonna try to sit down with the city manager as well.
Council's goal is to meet with each board and commission at least annually. But it hasn't been the year over
August.
Yeah, okay.
So right then,
We can work on trying to determine a date.
yeah, that'd be really good.
One other quick thing, just public engagement, Alati Street, online meeting and survey is open till the 30th. So if you haven't participated, or if you have
It
friends.
was awesome. I did it. It was great.
Good, good. I'd like to hear.
Both together.
How's your engagement been on it? Is it, so we checked on, I think Tuesday, we met with a consultant, we had 153 visitors to these, 153 survey responses. And then 60?
Map comments?
Yeah, 60 map comments, so, yeah.
How many people live on?
So we sent out 300 postcards. Yeah, so around 300 households, so.
Except for that, I know my household's at least 2 of those 153. We live nowhere near a lobby, so.
I commented 58 times.
Vested interest.
All right, field visit.
Yes.
So we put a doodle out there. Did we get responses from everybody?
Yeah, I think, let's see, I think I'm missing Matt.
Yeah.
I don't think I did it.
I don't think I did.
All right, well, you guys don't get a say. So what is the date that we can get those people there?
Well, so right now, Doodle is indicating the 4th works for most people, but Kelly, you can't make it October 4th, is what you indicated. And then I don't know.
I think that works for me.
October.
For a second, I thought you meant July 4th. I was like, are you crazy?
No,
You got something going on?
Yeah, I'm good at that. Yeah. I'm good at October 4th.
Currently, October 4th looks just fine.
Are you gonna feel
Yeah, can we shake your schedule?
needed if we, any chance we could find you a babysitter or something?
Yeah. Sure, no, I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking was on the 4th, but. So we shall.
It's in like the vibe of it.
Yeah, it just.
The whole 10-4 thing.
Let us know. We can help you get there in the 4th, but let's do it. Let's set October 4th.
Okay, October the 4th, perfect.
What time would that probably be at?
10-ish in the
It's
morning.
usually 5 in the morning is when we.
I'd like to see how the projects look at sunrise.
When does the Mineral Broadway intersection start getting done?
No, so we're working through concept in that, and we have a pretty significant funding shortfall in that one.
Oh, yeah.
So we're working to, the long story is we told the consultant like, hey, let's plan out kind of everything we want, and then let's go to CDOT and say, okay, how do we fund like these really, really good ideas? We have $3 million for it. The initial estimates came back at 21 million. So we're like, well, we can't go to CDOT and say, will you give us 7 times the funding? So we're reducing those concepts. We're still keeping everything in the concept, but kind of reducing and saying, what can we hit now and start the process and then build out? And so we're reviewing that next week. Then they're gonna give us a ballpark estimate. Then we're gonna go to CDOT. So
it could be like a year or 2 years until it's.
Yeah, it's 27 or 28 construction at this point.
So.
Any comments from staff, whether it be on here, we said review of the last discussion summaries, but any other comments from staff in general? Okay. Shane has one.
Just one thing I'll add also about Alati is, as the first round of public engagement closes, during the summer, we'll be working with the consultants to use that feedback and come up with alternatives. And then once we have those kind of alternatives kind of set up, what we'll do is we'll set up an actual corridor audit. We'll be walking the corridor. We'll invite the TMB, we'll invite members of community, members of council to go out and kind of walk the corridor all together and kind of try to visualize in the field, what do these alternatives look like? So.
Good idea.
That'll be August, September-ish. We don't have a date yet, but just wanted to put it out there. So
If we say like free snacks, get.
that would get me there if I wasn't already involved with the project.
I want like VR goggles so I can look at the.
Shannon, you also want to do the 3A?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah.
So he asked earlier if I could report on the 3A audit.
Yeah.
That was really good. So there was a great presentation. It was very similar to, what you presented earlier of where the funding went and stuff. We asked questions of was it a reasonable amount of staff to, actually paying for the project, and those different things. There was discussions on, how they're slicing the pie of, the pie chart of, what percentage of, for instance, if they bought an electric vehicle, did that go to environmental sustainability, or did it go to just, the fleet? There was a whole bunch of questions of that, but the overarching thing was, it was really great, and they had a great presentation, and everyone was really confident that the funds were being used well and for their intended purposes, so. Yeah. That's as fast as I could do it.
I'm really actually very impressed.
And then the last thing is the agenda look ahead. It's not in the packet, but I'll do the best off the top of my head while Shane pulls it up.
Yeah.
Next month, we have the LPS superintendent talking with us. So that is, I know that's July 5th. There was something else we were trying to cram in there.
Yes.
Does he work during the summer?
What's that?
What, you go and pull it up and another thing that we're pulling together for August or September is talking to the economic development coordinator for the city, as well as potentially the Chamber of Commerce as well. So trying to think about the economic impacts and want to hear from them. How do they, what issues do they have with our transportation network? What do they want to see it look like? How are they thinking about that from an economic development perspective? Also, back as well. So trying to, a little bit of education, if you will, but also trying to connect bases that we don't necessarily always do here. What else do we have? That's July. We're trying to do both in July. Yeah. I don't know that that's going to be enough time. That's a lot to try to jam in.
It is a lot, yeah.
Should we do August for Corey?
Yeah, well, we originally were gonna have them today, right? Wasn't that the original plan?
Yeah, and I think the hard part is like when schedules align because they are, leading kind of important organizations and groups. We can kind of reach out and see if they have some flexibility.
Flexibility for August or September, we can look at that.
I was gonna say, I'm sure that Todd will probably not, because it took us.
Yeah,
4 or
Todd
5
is locked
months, So
in.
we're probably locked in, but yeah, we can explore that, so.
And to be fair to him, he's been locked in for like 3 months, like he's committed a lot.
And school's starting, man, it's gonna.
And so then what do we have in August right here? We're gonna do
So if we need to touch on anything else TMP related, that's just contingency. Safer streets, council recap, we tentatively have a meeting scheduled in August to present to council on that.
Sidewalk fee is a topic I'm excited about.
well, so that was, I wanted to do that after we talked about the economic development aspect. I feel like those play together. So maybe if we can get Corey to come in August and then we do the funding in September. What do we have in September right now? Maybe right afterwards, maybe a meeting.
Tentatively, Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan, we may, we guys be under contract at that point, so that one may be one that gets pushed. So
That was where also, so trying to reach out to different groups within the city, economic development, community development, trying to have some conversations around that. What does that mean relative to the work that we're trying to do in our initiative and our priorities? So that's what September is, but then as you can see beyond that, we don't really have much filled in. So we need some, I'm looking for some input. What do we want to do? Like, what are
Kind of
our next-
relative to related to the economic picture, we talked to the, what do they call themselves? The downtown development?
PDA.
I say that,
I mean, we have, I don't think we've in any formal capacity.
in connection with them.
Yeah.
That could be one to see if we can talk to that to get an update from them and make that connection. I think one of the things we need to talk about as a group is what mountain do we want to climb here? Like,
What is the big, most impactful thing we could do?
what's our kind of 6 to 12 month goal? So that we can plan the next few months around that.
Well, knowing the fate of the TMP will help. I guess if that's off the table, we've got, we need to fill the gap.
So one thing I've been floating for a while is trying to have a study session that's not in a public building, not in a government building, but a public area, like meeting at a coffee shop or something and having it open to the public,
Yeah,
having a conversation. I feel like maybe that study session might be a good time
I think that'd be great.
to have a conversation around what are our goals, what do we want to set as our North Star for the next year. You guys open to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we have to post it, so.
We post it, yeah, I mean, it would be publicly accessible, anyone can come. I'm sure if we did like Lost Coffee, they would be upset if people didn't want to buy a cup of coffee, just want to listen to us, but
If it's warmer weather time still, like Nixon's on the trail could be really cool.
I think that's a great idea as well.
Hudson Gardens right there, we have that little sitting area with the stones and everything around it. Yeah.
Also, it potentially gets us more public comment in terms of what they look at.
Yeah.
So at this point, what do we think, like late July for that meeting? Do you think earlier, later?
I would think July's busy.
July's pretty much done.
Yeah,
Okay, so August,
yeah, I think August
It might be a little easier.
early August.
Yeah.
Why don't we,
That might be like tons of people out on vacation still. I was thinking maybe September, early September, because it's still warm in early September.
I feel like end
Not that far.
end of August.
End of August. could
End
be
of
good.
August probably be okay.
It's
Kids
so
are-
busy, like
school's
right
little-
to start, yeah, right, school settled a bit, you know.
I wanna do it, I don't wanna push it off too far because as you can see, we need to start filling in like October, November, December, thinking about what we're doing there.
I think end of August would be great.
You wanna do like a Saturday or weekday?
I'm kind of open.
Saturday would be great, Saturday morning.
I think a weekend would probably be better, especially with all the events, like I know it's conference season for myself. And other people, like parents have school events coming up, sporting events.
Like an August 30th?
Sounds good.
I'm probably busy just like October.
Actually, August 30 works really well for me. Should we just put it in the calendar? Should we talk
You're
about
the
it?
chair, so if it works well for you, let's do it.
I should be, I know I'll be traveling that week, but I should be back by the 30th. And just like a 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning,
Is
something
that
like
Labor Day weekend?
that? Yes, that is Labor Day
Oh,
weekend.
yeah, no,
I'm
that
gonna
won't
be
work
gone.
well.
Oh, yeah.
No, everyone will be traveling.
So,
I will also be traveling.
One before.
so now we're into,
No, you can do the one before.
23rd.
Yeah, let's do 23rd.
I will not be here the
I
23rd.
won't be here the 23rd, but.
Maybe we need a doodle poll.
Anyway.
Maybe we can do a doodle poll.
We can chat about it on the 9th. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody look at their calendars. They actually, maybe a doodle if you guys would, I could do a doodle.
Yeah, they're still at work right now, so.
All right. Any other comments from the board? All right, meeting adjourned.
Yeah, good meeting, everyone. We need a Littleton bus. Pretty awesome.
Sounds like Josh